the reason that the weather has become such a big issue is because of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, okay? And their reports about, we're warming and it's definitely going to keep warming. The fact they've been wrong with every forecast they made is forgotten in the hysteria. But what people don't realize is that their definition of climate change, given to them by the United Nations, by the United Nations Federal or Commission on Climate Change, was they only look at climate changes caused by humans. They don't look at natural causes of climate change.
You mean cyclical?
Oh, any of them. They don't look at the sun. They don't look at the cycles of the ocean. They don't look at. They don't even look at water vapor.
I thought it was fascinating.
Most important greenhouse gas.
I thought it was fascinating that most of the greenhouse gases are water vapor. What's the percentage? Do you know?
95% by volume.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yes, so what they've done is they've defined their role is to look at climate change as the human causes of climate change, and of course what I keep pointing out to people is you can't possibly determine what portion of climate change is human if you don't know how it changes naturally. But that's what they're doing. And so by the way, just back to the Arctic ice, can we flip back to that for a second,
let's
just to illustrate the point here?
Yes, please.
Every single winter, the Arctic freezes over, and surrounding oceans, Hudson Bay, for example, and out into the Bering Straits, and approximately 15 million square kilometers of ice forms every winter. But every summer, about 10 million square kilometers of that ice melts. So about two-thirds melts every single summer. Now, 10 million square kilometers of ice is an area equal to the continental U.S. Most people don't even know that.
I don't. I'm not sure the listeners know that either.
No. So you've got 10 million square kilometers of ice melting every single summer. But here's the most remarkable thing. That 10 million square kilometers melts in about 140 days. That means it's melting at the rate of 66,000 square kilometers of ice a day.
Wow.
And that is equal to half the size of the state of Illinois every single day. Okay, and now let's do that. Let's play the sensational game, because a couple of years ago they came out and they. Okay, because a couple of years.
You're making me laugh. Go ahead. Let's play the sensational game.
Yeah, a couple of years ago they came out and said, "Oh, more ice melted this summer than last year, an area the size of Texas." Okay, why did they use Texas? Oh, it's big in people's minds. That's a huge area. But in fact, Texas is an area, as a percentage of the 10 million square kilometers, is only about 4%. So that 4%, of course, is within the natural fluctuation of the amount of ice from year to year that melts. So it's actually well within normal variability, but because of the way they presented the story and because they know people don't know that 10 million square kilometers melts every single summer, that they can get away with this stuff. And of course, then they say the polar bears, they're drowning, and Gore had that movie. And the woman that took that picture, by the way, of the polar bears up on that chunk of ice, she came out and said, look, we were on a cruise up there, and we watched the polar bears. They swam over and got up on the ice to get a better view of us. And another interesting part of this, just to illustrate lack of understanding, and I mentioned working with the polar bear people, polar bears only evolved from Alaskan brown bears about 100,000 years ago, which is relatively recent. They adapted to a white coat in order to hide from their prey, which is mostly seal. They are superb swimmers. I have seen them 80, 90 miles offshore swimming away in the open ocean. The reason that they're good swimmers is because of the way that their fur is structured. The polar bear needs two types of furs. It needs a short fur, which is very dense. And to illustrate how dense, when I was working at Churchill, there was a scientist there who wanted to count the number of polar bears. And he said, look, I'll just go up in an airplane with an infrared camera, and I'll take pictures of them, and wherever they are, the heat will show, and I'll count the heat spots, and that'll tell me how many polar bears there are. He found out that they took an infrared picture of the polar bear, and it didn't show up. because the polar bear retains so much of its body heat, none was escaping through that fur.
Fascinating.
That's remarkable. Okay, and of course, the polar bear literally controls its body temperature through its anus. Now,
that's definitely a TMI type of content.
Yes.
I did a piece with Mitch Taylor, but he didn't mention that. That was interesting.
Well, I guess Mitch didn't want to be as indelicate as I am in your program. I feel that I'm more familiar with you than Mitch.
Let me let you finish, and then I wanted to ask you about methane, and I want to talk to you about permafrost, but please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Now, the other fur that the polar bear has is the long fur, which is hollow. And, of course, the polar bear needs to get sunlight into it. It's got two things going against it. One, it's got this very dense fur, but it's also white. And, of course, white means you reflect a lot of the sunlight. The polar bear, for its climate, should be black. But if it was black, it wouldn't be able to sneak up on its prey. And, of course, its prey is white because it's trying to hide into the snow background. So this fur that the polar bear has is hollow. The sunlight hits it, is transmitted down inside the fur into the body to raise the body temperature. Now, if you've got fur that is hollow and long like that, it means that you can float. And if you next time you look at polar bear swimming, you'll see how all this long fur is up all around it, floating on the top of the water. And the polar bear just simply paddles away with its great big paws, which are wide and flat so that it's like a snowshoe, but that works wonderfully well as a paddle in the water.
Have you ever met one?
Oh, yes.
How close were you?
Oh, within about 20 feet.
And how was it for you?
Frightening. Frightening.
Were you in a boat, or where were you?
We were on searches out of Churchill, and we went out into the town of Churchill. And of course, what they do is they wait along the shore of the Hudson Bay, waiting for the ice to form, and you have to be very careful because the boulders and so on. You can't tell what's a polar bear and what's a boulder.
I think at some point you would find out.
Yeah, oh yeah, you would. You get surprised. Well, and of course they have polar bear patrols. I mean, for the kids going to school and so on. And we just happened to surprise this one, and fortunately he was more surprised than we were.
Thank God.
Took off the other way.
Now, this was during your search and rescue days.
Search and rescue time, yeah.
Tell us briefly about your search and rescue. What did you do?
I was a navigator and electronics officer and flying with the Canadian Air Force, and we were based in Winnipeg, but all of our search area was into the prairies and then the Yukon Northwest Territories right to the North Pole. But most of our searches were in the wintertime in the Arctic. And of course, one of the things that every nation has to do as part of their UN agreement is provide search and rescue. And so I was on and this was long before GPS was available. And one of the things that people don't realize is you reach a certain point in Canada where there's a line on the map which says your compass is unreliable beyond this point. And so people were constantly getting lost. The other thing is, in the wintertime, once you get north of the tree line, the lakes are frozen, the snow covers everything, you can't even identify lakes, so it's very easy to get lost. And so I was involved in a lot of the major searches in the early days in the Arctic and the Yukon, and it was one of the things that got me really excited about this planet and how incredible it is. For example, Baffin Island and the fjords there, they make Norway look like a flatland. It's just an unbelievable experience. Only two things I regret. One is I didn't take enough photographs, and the other is I didn't buy enough Eskimo carvings before they got too expensive. But I did buy some. And by the way, I got to know the Inuit people, or as Canada calls them, incredible people. Absolutely incredible people. And how they survive in that environment is just amazing.
Well, how do they survive?
Well, they do what we've got to do. You don't fight nature. You go with the flow. You go with what nature will allow you to do, and you know that as most people know that nature can kill you. She's a pretty harsh mistress, and so their technology and adaptability of things.